Namaste, welcome back to Stithapragna channel. You are watching AWS Certified Solutions Architect Exam Question Analysis series. We have released so far 9 parts, and will be the 10th part. We will do 15 more questions. And if you are wondering why it's been a while that I released a video in this series, then it's it has to do with you guys. Okay, so the previous videos, there was not much activity going on with these videos. I don't see many people liking them or commenting them or subscribing or even viewing. So my goal is to deliver content based on how many people are actually want it, right? So the more people who are interested in a particular series, the frequency that I release or upload these videos will increase. For example, you might have already seen the other series, which is the Cloud Practitioner. If you already passed the exams, maybe you came from there to here. So that particular series has too much more activity compared with other series, because people or viewers, I would call them Stithapragnans, they are interested in that particular videos and they want me to upload frequently. So I release one video every day on that particular playlist. If you want me to do the same for this series, it is in your hands. Okay, so just go ahead, like the video and comment and subscribe. That is indirectly going to tell me that people, Stithapragnans, are interested in these videos and I need to upload them every day or every other day, right? I mean, you agree with me, right? If nobody is interested, what is the point of me spending time and uploading this series videos instead of me spending time on making videos where people are interested? I would go pick that instead of this. That being said, I don't want to waste your time anymore, so let's get into this. Today we are going to hit that 100 mark, and I think I promised a while ago that if we do good with these videos, for example, go ahead, hit those likes. If you make that like and subscribe count increase, if the like count increase on this video, if it reaches 15, not 50, I will release a quiz set. Quiz set is something that I usually do, which will be the same questions that we covered in these videos, but there won't be any analysis. It's like a practice test for you guys, which tests whatever you learned so far. For example, we are here at the 100th question, so I will release quiz set 1, which will have at least, I think, 65 questions. So that will be from 1 to 65. So I will have questions. There won't be any me talking in those videos. It just, each question will be there for about half a minute or so. If you want more time, just pause it and then do it. There will be 65 questions, one after another, which will make the real exam. You can time it and check it to have you, not have you, but just practice by putting timer. You are like rehearsing for your actual exam. So do that. What am I saying? Yeah, okay. Yeah, I got lost. Okay, so that I will provide that, and at the end of that quiz will be the answer key set or answer key, where I will number the questions and then I will give the answers. So if you want that, 65 questions for Cloud Practitioner, I already released 3 quiz sets, and I promised them something which I call a mega quiz set. So each quiz set usually contains 65 or 70 questions, but mega quiz set will have 200 questions. So I am planning to do the same here, but it all depends on your interest. If nobody is interested, then I won't waste my time preparing this. I want my time to be useful to you guys. So if you want it, just show me you want it by liking this video and subscribing and commenting. And let's get started for real this time. A company seeks a storage solution for its application. The solution must be highly available and scalable. The solution also must function as a file system be mountable by multiple Linux instances. Okay, as soon as you see this, then there is only one such storage system that you can actually mount on multiple Linux systems, which is EFS. Okay, that is one. Some might say like, oh, we have EBS multi-attach as well, but that has a specific requirement, and even the multi-attach is only available on IO1 and IO2 types, not the other GP2, GP3, unless and until the question mentions them. When they say mountable by multiple Linux instances, the answer is EFS, so you don't have to read any further. But if there are multiple EFS, if you see C and D both has EFS, then you might have to read the remaining question. In AWS and on-premises through native protocols and have no minimum size requirements. Okay, the company has set up a site-to-site VPN for access from its on-premise networks to VPC. Okay, which storage solution meets? And as I mentioned, we can eliminate these two because it has to be EFS. EFS is mentioned in C and D. Let's see what is the difference. Amazon Elastic file system with multiple mount targets. Amazon EFS with single mount target, multiple access points. Why we are saying C is better than D? Because we are talking here about a highly available and scalable. Okay, so instead of D, obviously going with multiple mount targets, this will be much better than just going with a single mount target and multiple access point. What if this single mount target fails? Even if you have multiple access points, if you have single mount point, and if this fails, then you are done. This is not highly available. So when you have multiple mount targets, even if one fails, you still have other mount targets that you can use to access it. For that reason, we will go with C and not D. A company is building a 3-tier application on AWS. The presentation tier will serve a static website. The logic tier is a containerized application. So we have a web tier, then we have compute tier or web application tier, which is a containerized application. This application will store data in a relational database. I think that's the third database tier. The company wants to simplify deployment and to reduce operational costs. They want to simplify deployment and reduce operational costs. Which solution will meet? So by default, whenever you see static website, by default S3 is the best option, and they want to reduce operational, so it's just a click away from hosting that static website. Okay, so which one says S3 to host static? A and C. So let's eliminate B and D. Okay, because this is not using S3 to host static. So the difference between this A and C is here we are using ECS, whereas here we are using EKS, which is a Kubernetes service. Both do the same thing. It's just this is like based on an open source tool, and this is a proprietary tool, Kubernetes service. And they are talking about operational costs. Okay, remember that. Simplify deployment. And again, compared with ECS, Kubernetes service is more pricier because again it is a proprietary tool. So when we are talking about costs, we would go ahead and pick A instead of C. Okay, because A and C are same. It's just here it is ECS and here it is EKS. Both can do the job. But since we are talking about operational costs, we will pick the cheaper one. A company is looking for a solution that can store video archives in AWS from old news footage. The company needs to minimize costs and will rarely need to restore these files. When the files are needed, they must be available in a maximum of 5 minutes. Okay. So first of all, when you say video archives, usually you will think of Glacier, but Glacier has multiple types available. So which one you have to pick, because there are two Glaciers here. And first of all, when it says video archives and they say minimize costs and rarely need to restore these files, then eliminate C and D, because you video archives usually you don't store on this, usually you store, and again as I said Glacier, but this one guarantees that it is not C and D. and then A and B both are glacial. Okay, how do you eliminate one? Well, based on maximum of 5 minutes, because even though you have multiple ones, each one has its own retrieval time period, and the standard retrieval won't do it for us, because the standard retrieval will take more time to I think it is in like what, 12 to 45 hours. So this is not what we want. They want max 5 minutes, which is done by expedited. Expedited retrieval will be like, if I am not wrong, almost instantaneous or within 5 minutes, something like that. Okay, so you can check out those. We already did check out different S3 storage plans that are available, so I'm not going to show you again. Okay, so that's about this. A company wants to move from many standalone AWS accounts to a consolidated multi-account architecture. As soon as you see consolidated multi-account architecture, you should shout saying organizations. Okay, if you I'm sorry if you're not following the cloud practitioners, you won't know what sometimes I say. When I say shout, I usually have these keywords explained that you will link with a particular AWS service. Okay, when you look at a particular keyword in question, when you say it out loud, you will remember it easily and long term, compared with you just read or listen to what I am talking. Okay, repeat after me. Okay, when you hear consolidated multi-account architecture, the solution you use is organizations, AWS organizations. Say it along with me. Consolidated multi-account architecture is AWS organization. Okay, so that using that we can eliminate some of these options. For example, you can pretty much eliminate C and B and C without even reading further. Let's cross those out, because A, D and E has organization in it. The company plans to create many new AWS accounts for different business units. The company needs to authenticate access to these AWS accounts by using a centralized corporate directory service. Okay, this is another part of the question. First, they want to use something to consolidate, then they need some other service to centralize corporate directory service. Then which combination of the actions? Okay, so first of all, option A, we will create organization in AWS with all features turned on. Then we will create the new account. So this is the first part of the question. Done. We already got it. Consolidated multi-account architecture means use AWS organizations. Okay, I think you will remember that till next 20 years. Then we have centralized corporate directory service. Okay, for that, let's see which one to use. And let's look at option D. Create a new organization. Configure the okay. So since we already did this, actually we can even cross this out, because we have already did that. So if you want to pick between A and D, first is good. Then they are talking about configure the organization's authentication mechanism to use AWS directory service directly. No, you cannot do that. In AWS, your authentication, everything has to go through IAM, right? So for example, if you're coming from Azure, in Azure you have AD or Active Directory. Then on Azure you have AAD, which is Azure Active Directory. In AWS we have IAM here, right? Identity and Access Management. So B you can cross out, because that is, you cannot do that. So the answer will be by default E. Set up an AWS IAM Identity Center in the organization. They renamed it. Previously it used to be called Single Sign-On SSO, but they now renamed it to Identity Center. Configure IAM Identity Center and integrate it with the company's corporate directory service. That's it. A company containerized a Windows job that runs on a .NET 6 framework under a Windows container. The company wants to run this job in the AWS cloud. The job runs every 10 minutes. The job's runtime varies between 1 minute and 3 minutes. Which solution will meet this requirement? First of all, they are talking about containerized services. So whichever service is not containerized services, then you can eliminate them. Okay, so because they are talking about most cost effectively. So by that, you can eliminate A and B. Yeah, you might make those things happen with these two, but when you're talking about container, by default you don't go with those services when you clearly have ECS mentioned here, which is a service basically used for containerized. Okay, so that being said, here we have these two options, almost similar. The first part. Second part, we are talking about create a scheduled task based on the container image of the job to run every 10 minutes. Create a standalone task based on the container image Windows task scheduler to run this. So here you don't have to use the Windows scheduler to run it. You don't have to create a standalone task first and then go ahead and no, this is not cost effective because you are not utilizing the features that are available on here. Okay, so what you can do is you can go ahead and create a scheduled task from right here to run every 10 minutes, which will save some money. Instead of I don't know how much we can save, but at least this is operationally efficient compared with option D. Okay, and here we're talking about forget, so let's see what it is, right? Not it is, but let's see how it is going to bill you. So AWS forget, it will bill you based on the amount of CPU, RAM, OS, CPU architecture and storage that your containerized apps consume while running on either ECS in this sense or EKS. From the time you start downloading a containerized image until the ECS task or EKS part ends. Now, on the other hand, we have other services, for example, like Lambda. So that's why I said these can do it, but why we are not going with it? Because this will involve some re-architecting, right? Because here we have already the containers, everything is in place, but here you need to write your own Lambda function to have to use that containerized whatever job they have here. Okay, so why do we want to take the long route when we clearly have an easier option? Okay, and again we have B batch, which does not support Windows containers on either forget or EC2 resources, so we can completely ignore that. That being said, our answer C remains. A company wants to migrate 100 GB of historical data from an on-premise location to an Amazon S3 bucket. The company has a 100 megabits per second, megabits, it's not megabytes. When this is capital B, it is megabyte. Now it is bits. 100 megabits is something like divided by 8, then you will get megabytes. So it's about what? 13, 14, 14, 13. Yeah, give or take 13. 13 megabytes, that is the speed. Internet connection on premises. The company needs to encrypt the data in transit. Okay, the company will store new data directly in Amazon S3. Which solution? With least operational overhead, which means everything that you are seeing in the question, if a single tool can do it, then we'll go ahead with that. You know, that's what the least operational overhead, instead of deploying some other tool and doing it. Okay, let's look at the options. Now they are talking about AWS sync command in the client to move the data directly into S3 bucket. Well, no, don't use it. Usually you will use S3 sync to sync between buckets. Okay, not copy data from your on-premise, which is not S3 to S3. Then we have data sync to migrate data from, yes, we can use this. Let's check other options as well. Let's put that on hold. Use Snowball to move the data to an S3 bucket. Well, you can do that, but here we have about 100 GB of data. So unless and until your data is in TBs, Snowball is not recommended, because this will take at least a week. Okay, so here you have 100 GB. Do you want to wait 7 or 10 days just to have that? And they're talking about least operational overhead. Here, you know, you need to create a request, they will send the device, then you have to copy the data to the device, then send it back, then all that. Okay, setup, I mean, at least compared with B, C, I don't recommend it because it has operational overhead. Here they are talking about set up VPN connection, then use the S3 copy command. This is again similar to something like this, and here this is more operational overhead because you need to set up a VPN connection here. I mean, whether it is B or D, both happen through from public internet. So what is the point of you setting up that and doing it when you can use data sync and do that? Okay, so our answer will be use data sync. As you know, data sync is a fully managed data transfer service that simplifies and automates the process of moving data between on-premise storage and S3, which is specifically designed for that. It is not just that. We have to encrypt the data in transit as well. It provides secure and efficient data transfer with built-in encryption, ensuring that the data is encrypted in transit. By using a data sync, the company can easily migrate the 100 GB of historical data from their on-premise location to S3, and it will also handle the encryption of data in transit and ensure secure transfer. A company hosts a 3-tier web application in the AWS cloud. The multi-AZ Amazon RDS for MySQL Server forms the database layer. Amazon Elasticache forms the cache layer. There goes our 3 tiers. The company wants a caching strategy that adds or updates data in the cache when a customer adds an item to the database. The data in the cache must always match the data in the database. Which solution will meet? Okay, here we already have the caching layer and we are already using Amazon Elasticache. Okay, they just want a strategy wherein you can update, adds or update the data in the cache. So now let's look at the options here. So we have implement the lazy loading. So now you need to understand what these does. Lazy loading, right through. So let's look at the first option, implement the lazy loading caching strategy. So this one, it typically involves populating the cache only when data is requested. That's why it is called lazy. And it does not guarantee that the data in the cache always matches the data in the database. Our requirement here says it should always match the data in database, but with lazy loading, it's lazy. Unless and until you initiate, it won't start. So let's cross that out. Then let's see C. Implement the adding TTL caching strategy. TTL means time to leave. So this strategy involves setting an expiration time for cache data. It is useful for scenarios where the data can be considered valid for a specific period, but it does not guarantee that the data in the cache is always in sync with the database. Right? Will you agree or not? What if you put let's say 5 minutes? Okay, let's say you put TTL as 5 minutes, and if you got changes or added data got added in 2 minutes, then you won't have them until that 5 minutes gets expired. So it won't match the data in the database always. Then we have implement the AWS app config caching strategy. This is a service that helps you deploy and manage application configuration. It is not specifically designed for caching data synchronization between a database and a caching layer. So let's cross that. Then we are left with option B, which is implement the write through caching strategy. Okay, so what this does is when a customer adds or updates an item in the database, the application first writes the data to the database and then it updates the caching or the cache with the same data. This ensures that the cache is always synchronized with the database, as every write operation triggers an update to the cache. So which matches with our requirement. So this is the answer. So this is you might say, it is not talking about which kind of tools you need to use for a particular scenario. Instead, it's talking about strategy. A business application is hosted on Amazon EC2 and uses S3 for encrypted object storage. The Chief Information Security Officer has directed that no application traffic between the two services should traverse the public internet. Okay. As soon as you see this, the keyword, you need to say it loud. Say it loud. Whenever you're talking about traffic between EC2 and S3, if it says should not go through public internet, then what should come to your mind? VPC endpoint. And specifically, which VPC endpoint should come? Gateway VPC endpoint. Say it. Traffic between EC2 and S3 privately. The tool is Gateway VPC endpoint. Gateway VPC endpoint lets you traffic from EC2 to S3 on a private connection. Okay, so now our answer, we already got our answer, which is B. Even if they mention interface endpoint, no, that is not the answer, because as I showed you in a picture, from EC2 to S3 or DynamoDB, S3 and DynamoDB, it happens through gateway VPC endpoint, and the remaining services interface VPC endpoint. Okay, you need to know that difference. So let's cross this out. And again, as soon as you see EC2 S3 traffic should be private, it should be gateway VPC endpoint. A company is making a prototype of the infrastructure for its new website by manually provisioning the necessary infrastructure. The infrastructure includes an auto-scaling group, an application load balancer, and an Amazon RDS database, which is a typical setup. After the configuration has been thoroughly validated, the company wants the capability to immediately deploy the infrastructure for development and production use in 2 availability zones in an automated fashion. Yeah. By just reading the first line, I understood that they are going to ask infrastructure as a code service, and they said automated. So when you want to automate your infrastructure deployment into multiple environments, what is the service that should come to your mind? There is only one infrastructure as a code service available on AWS, or the AWS service, which is, come on, okay, you don't remember, which is AWS Cloud Formation. Okay, now let's see which one of those options are have the Cloud Formation. Actually none of them, only one of them have it, so you can blank or cross those out, and then there is only one which says Cloud Formation. And that is not the only, I mean, this is the AWS tool, but there are you can use OpsWork, AWS OpsWork. I mean, it's not a tool, it just uses other third-party tools like Chef and Puppet. Those are infrastructure as code tools as well, but since they didn't mention here, we are good. Okay, the answer is B, just because it has Cloud Formation in it, but let's go through options as well. Systems manager to replicate and provision the prototype infrastructure in 2 availability zones. Okay, prototype infrastructure, well, even if you want, it won't configure each and every setting that you actually use. And using systems manager, I don't think you can do create auto scaling, create RDS, application load balancer, then create security groups. No, you cannot do that. Use AWS config to record the inventory of resources that are used in the prototype. No, you cannot do that. AWS config is to track configuration changes, and config to deploy, no, it cannot do that. Elastic Beanstalk, yes, to some extent it can, but it won't, you won't have the say in what it should trigger. Configure it to use an automated reference to the prototype infrastructure to know. So the question here is, they already did it, they want to do similar thing, which you cannot do with any other tool other than Cloud Formation. So that basically just take that from this particular question. A law firm needs to share information with the public. The information includes hundreds of files that must be publicly readable. Modifications or deletions of the files by anyone before a designated future date are prohibited. Okay, they are talking about modifications or deletions of the files. Which solution will meet these requirements most secure way? Okay, so this one, what they are saying, no one should be able to delete or modify the files before a designated future date. Okay, so let's go through each option to figure out what is the best way to do it. Upload all files to S3 bucket that is configured for static website hosting. Grant read-only IAM permissions to any AWS principals that access the bucket until the designated date. Okay, so this sounds good, but still we are not protecting them from being modified or deleted. Yes, here you are giving read-only IAM permissions that access, but here we are talking about by anyone. Even if there are some people who are not accessing through this, okay, what about that? Are we protecting those files from modifications or deletions? No, we are not. Okay, so let's cross that out. Then we have, let's look at options C, B and C both have with S3 versioning enabled. Okay, then we have here, okay, let's look at this since we have both. Configure an event trigger to run an AWS Lambda function in case of object modification. No, so this is completely wrong, because we want to stop somebody modifying deletion, not notify somebody else. So cross that out. Let's look at D. Upload all files, that is which is similar to A. Select the folder that contains the files. Use S3 object lock with a retention period in accordance with the designated date. Grant read-only IAM permissions to any AWS principals that access. No, we don't need to do that. Okay, first of all, as whenever you hear modifications or deletions, first of all, what should come to your mind? Versioning should come to your mind. D is not talking about it. Okay, modifications or deletions, what should come to your mind? Versioning should come to your mind. So let me show you something. Okay, let's look here. It's talking about object lock. Using this, you can store objects using a write once read many model. Object lock can help prevent objects from being deleted or overwritten for a fixed amount of time or indefinitely. You can use object lock to help meet regulatory requirements, which is what we are looking for in our question. Okay, that being said, if you come here, you will see this. Object lock works only in versioned buckets, which means you should have already enabled versioning. And option D is using object lock, but it is not mentioning anything about version. So the answer is B, because it has versioning enabled, then it is using object lock, then it is creating static website, and then it is doing the read-only access to the objects. Okay, so how did we eliminate it? First of all, we eliminated by looking at the versioning. Actually, C has versioning, but it is talking about notifying somebody instead of stopping it. So that's why we cross that out. A group requires permissions to list an Amazon S3 bucket and delete objects from that bucket. An administrator has created the following, which is this IAM policy to provide access to the bucket and applied that policy to the group. The group is not able to delete objects in the bucket even after doing that. So the company follows least privilege rule. What is least privilege? Which means give only permissions to what they require. Don't give permissions for everything. Which statement should a solutions architect add to the policy? Okay, now let's understand how the policies, what they created, why they are unable to delete objects. Okay, so action list object, delete object, okay, which is looking fine. Then the resource effect allow, they didn't restrict to particular IP addresses or something. So this is, they should be able to, but what is missing here, if you see, they gave it an bucket name, but we are trying to delete objects, not buckets. So what you should do is, after bucket name, you should put a slash, then a star. So what that represents is, we are telling any object inside that bucket you can delete. Since they didn't mention, I think that's why they are having problems. So let's see which option has that. Okay, here we have that option. Actually A, B and D have that option. C just says star, not slash star. So let's cross it out. Let's go with A, B and D. Here it says star object. No, you should not. They are going with least privilege. So never use action stars at all. So let's cross that out. Same thing with B, cross that out. So our answer will be D. Instead of giving all actions, access to all actions, it is only giving delete object. And then they've said slash star, which means all objects in it. So this is our answer. So don't give star in actions. It's not recommended. A company is expecting rapid growth in the near future. A solutions architect needs to configure existing users and grant permissions to new users on AWS. Okay, which makes sense. The solutions architect has decided to create IAM groups, which is what a best practice to do. The solutions architect will add the new users to IAM groups based on department. Okay, so the groups are divided based on departments. Which additional action is the most secure way to grant permissions to the new users? Okay, let's look at these options right here. Let's go through one after another. Apply SCP to manage access permissions. So SCP, which is the service control policies, is something that is maintained at an organization level. Here we are not talking about the question is not talking about even they have an organizations and etc. So let's cross that out. Then we have because we are not talking about multiple accounts here, so there is no point of our AWS organization, which means we don't have SCP there. Then we have create IAM roles that have least privilege permission. Attach the roles to IAM groups. So here they're talking about IAM roles that have least privilege permissions. Okay, so how do you make sure that if it has least privilege permissions? Well, you can do that. You can have that roles. No, actually roles you cannot attach them to groups. Okay, you can only attach policies to groups. So let's cross that out. Then we have create IAM roles, associate the roles with the permissions boundary that defines the maximum permissions. Now we are creating groups. Specifically we said we are creating groups. We just want which additional action. We are not talking about replacing that entire thing with roles. We are talking about just modify a little bit here and there to the groups and make this happen. So the answer is C. Okay, create an IAM policy that grants least privilege permission. Attach the policy to the groups. That makes sense because an IAM policy is an object in AWS that, when associated with an identity or resource, defines their permissions. Permissions in the policies determine whether a request is allowed or denied. You manage access in AWS by creating policies and attaching them to IAM identities. What are IAM identities? Like users, group of users, or roles, or AWS resources. A company is designing a containerized application that will use Amazon Elastic Container Service. The application needs to access a shared file system. Okay, shared file system. When we see shared file system, what did I tell you? Say it loud. Shared file system, EFS. Shared file system, EFS. That is highly durable and can recover data to another AWS region with a recovery point objective of 8 hours. The file system needs to provide a mount target in each availability zone within region. A solutions architect wants to use AWS backup to manage the replication to another region. Which solution will meet these requirements? Okay, whenever you hear shared file system, you can directly go with EFS. Okay, this is highly durable and it can do the others as well. Okay, and there is something called Amazon EFS replication. Let me open up the documentation for you. Okay, if you look at this, EFS replication can replicate your file system data to another region or within the same region without requiring additional infrastructure or custom process. It automatically and transparently replicates your data to a second file. You can go ahead and read it. I'm not going to, but which is one of the requirement, right? The file system needs to provide a mount target in each and etc. replication to another region. So that is our answer. So let's cross these out. If you like this content, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and like and comment on the videos. That will really help this channel grow. If you have already subscribed, thank you very much. I really appreciate your subscription. A company has multiple VPCs across AWS regions to support and run workloads that are isolated from workloads in other regions. Because of a recent application launch requirement, the company's VPCs must communicate with all other VPCs across all regions. As soon as you see VPCs must communicate, and if they are not saying one VPC to another VPC, just two VPCs, then there is only one service, which is come on, transit gateway. Okay, if they are asking so many VPCs, then it's transit gateway. If they are only talking about two VPCs, then it is VPC peering. Since they are talking about so many, look at the questions, which one has transit gateway, and looks like there is only one, which is option C. So you can directly pick that answer. You don't even have to go through other options. VPC peering, you can do it between two. So if you have so many, then you have to create so many VPC peering connections between those two. Obviously that is not least amount of administration effort, so cancel that out. Direct connect is a private connection between your on-premise and AWS cloud, not between VPCs. Cross that out. Private link across to connect, no. Again, private link, same thing, between services, it's not between VPCs. So answer is C. So our last question in this video: a company hosts a website on Amazon EC2 instances behind an ALB. The website serves static content. Website traffic is increasing, and company is concerned about a potential increase in cost. Okay, here we are talking about static content. Okay, so what are they asking us? They are concerned about potential increase in cost. So what should we suggest them when the website traffic is increasing? Let's look at the options. Create an Amazon Elastic Cache cluster. Connect the ALB to the cache clusters to serve cached files. So why would you do that? I mean, yeah, makes sense, because if the users are accessing the same content they already accessed, instead of serving them from wherever the static content is stored, you can actually cache it. Then they will hit the cache instead of that. So that is one way to do it. We are talking here about static content, which means most probably it is on S3. So what is the combination? Static website plus S3, and if you want to cache data, anything ring a bell? Obviously CloudFront, which is option A. So I would go for that instead of B, because here I have to set up an Elastic Cache now. That is going to increase the cost. When you use CloudFront, yes, and it will add little, but it depends on the data you are using, not by default the hosting a cache service, etc. And this is going to use edge locations all over the world. This doesn't. The user still have to come to that region and hit that. Obviously no. Then we have web application firewall and associated with, and add a rule to cache. No, you cannot do that. Create a second ALB. Why do you want to create another ALB? That is just going to increase the cost and route user traffic to closest region. So why do you have to manually do it? You already have a service, which is CloudFront, which routes the traffic to the closest edge location, and it also caches the data, unlike this. So you can directly pick this answer as soon as you see static content and cache. That by default is CloudFront. You don't even have to go for the other options. Alright, that being said, if you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Go ahead, subscribe, like, comment. That will help grow this channel. And thank you very much for spending your time and watching this. Do let me know for any suggestions in the comments, okay, whether I am doing good or not, if I can improve in something. Do let me know whatever your thoughts are. You can just say hi as well, it doesn't matter. Just if you want to talk, you can just say that. If you have any other question, shoot it out. And I really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you again. See you in the next one. Peace out. Have a nice day.